everybody, and welcome to Nomadic Diaries. Today, it is such a fun episode for me. I am really happy to introduce you to one of my dear friends who is here from originally Colorado. She is a keynote speaker, an author, and a coach. Welcome, Jean Marie DiGiovanna.
Thank you, Doreen. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, I can't believe you're downstairs in my house.
Well, San Miguel is quite a beautiful place and very quaint. And I really wanted to come here to experience the art and the culture. And it's got, it's great for nomads to come and visit.
That's stay. Great. Well, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today on Digital Nomads on this section is really how can we support, encourage, and perhaps warn people about the digital nomadic life. Now, I know that's a term you don't really care for. So tell us more about that first.
About warning or
about the terminology digital nomad?
Oh, the term digital nomad. Yes. So it's really funny because I didn't even know the term existed when I started my traveling journeys. My intention was really to live lighter, to explore more of the world, and to also see more people and develop more relationships in person. And so when I gave up my home and became home free and traveled and worked all over the world, it wasn't until the first year I started where I learned of the term digital nomad. And then I came to learn that it really associated it more with people in the digital field. To me, it was like tech.
Correct.
Tech people who were working off their computer and programmers. And I thought, well, that was my past life, but that's not this life. So I call myself a mobile businesswoman.
Oh, excellent. I love that terminology. It seems more serious. And I realized that the digital nomads, many of them have very, very serious and very meaningful jobs. But is it about the way you frame it?
Absolutely. It's like anything. The term that people know about is the term they're going to use. But when they speak to me and we talk about it, I often will say, I call myself a mobile businesswoman. And most of the time they say, oh, that makes sense. Because I do work in person too. So,
so it's a combination for you. You are not solely remote and on a computer all the time. You actually fly across the world and go to conferences, in the Far East and back to Colorado and anywhere that you are called, and you show up in person. So it's a combination lifestyle.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
So when did you start this journey, or just around about the time frame?
It was about a year before COVID started. And my first step on the journey, I had an opportunity. Well, a couple of things kind of happened where I decided I wanted to live lighter, but it was inspired from a trip I was in Southeast Asia for when I was on a speaking tour with a nonprofit called Together We Can Change the World. And the last stop, actually, funny enough, I was in Philippines for that tour, but then I got to work with a school in Cambodia, and it was such a moving experience. One of my most special places because of the people. And when I came back to my home and saw how much space I have and how much stuff I had, and I thought, this is crazy. I don't need all this. And if I want to live lighter, and also I was paying down some credit card debt. There was just a lot of combination of things that had me want to downsize. And I wanted to travel more. And so this was my opportunity. And I started out my journey in Costa Rica. But the funny thing was how I ended up there was completely intuitive. And I had a bunch of miles, from traveling. And I thought, okay, I've got to use up these miles. I had a certain period of time. And I thought, okay, I'll get my first ticket. And I knew it was the end of February. I believe it was 2018. And my cousins who were in Colorado actually said, oh, we're going away for the winter. Why don't you house sit for us for a few months? So I kind of officially started then. And then I said, I knew I was there till end of February. I got my ticket to Costa Rica. And that just kind of popped into my head. And I have had some friends there as well. So, but I didn't even know what airline to, fly into. So I was just kind of, a lot of it was just feeling called to do, just fell into place. So,
yes. I kind of recognize this. Our journey as, we were never really, we were somewhat digital nomads because we were on the road when I was writing Life in the Camel Lane. And I always said I would write Life in the Digital Nomad Lane. Haven't done that yet. But after 6 years, I think that there's certainly two things that I would say happen for many of us. And one is that there's an aging out process that happens for many of us. Although I do have friends in their 70s and 80s who are very much nomadic. But the other thing is, I often say that there should be a sticker on your boarding pass because it's sort of beware, because there are unintended consequences of changing your lifestyle like this. Have you had any big surprises that felt like unintended consequences as a result of doing this? Either way, positive or negative.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of positive experiences, a lot of opportunities to grow and develop, which is not always pleasant. But I will say the start of my journey and the first year I did this was probably one of the most transformational times of my life, because after the first week of arriving, you're kind of in vacation mode, and you're exploring. And then after the first week, it really hit me for the first time. And I thought, oh my God, I don't have a home to go back to. And it literally opened up a can of it opened up so much had me question, what does home mean? What does security mean? What does safety mean? And it really has you feel very ungrounded, but also it started my journey of like, what is home? And does it mean it's a physical location or not? And so that whole year was very roller coaster.
Striking. Yes.
The other unintended consequence, I will say, that surprised me was when I went back to Colorado after my first in Costa Rica. I lived there for 2 months, came back, and I only lived in Colorado for 10 years. So people don't know me from decades ago, right?
Right.
They don't know all the facets and who I am. And there was a lot of comments that were tough to take, whether it's, are you a vagabond? Are you couch surfing? I mean, it's crazy, the gamut.
Yes.
But again, it really, another growth experience after taking a lot personally, and then going to New England where everybody knew me and they were so excited and knew it was so aligned with who I am.
Yeah.
I started realizing, oh, that's their stuff, not mine.
Yes. Also, I think the period of time in which you did this was very telling, because you started in 2018. So say a year later, when you're evaluating all of this, is still.
Oh, sorry, you know what? Sorry, I think it was 2019. Oh, my years are messed up.
2019, that's fine.
2019. It was 2019 because
it's pre-pandemic
when COVID hit.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And what is so interesting that I laugh about this all the time, having lived outside and around the world for, 5 decades at this point, it's like, when you see a lot of cars lined up at a traffic light and you say, who let the cows out or what is happening here? It feels like we've witnessed a huge culture shift towards travel and nomadism and behavior in the last, since 2021, 2022, and we had the great resignation, right? So I think that your experience is hallmarked by some of society's behavior, because we flew yesterday on a plane, just internal in Mexico, and I was like, where did all these people come from? Because there wasn't that interest in travel before. It was still available. I think prices were less. And I thought, gosh, I really dream of the days when I found myself sitting alone in Charles de Gaulle Airport, wondering where's the rest of the world, ready to get on a plane, And so I think that your experience, you're lucky that you got started before the gates opened. But in a way, how do you think this is changing the world? The fact that travel is more accessible and more people are interested. How do you think this is changing the world? That's the first question.
Well,
the second one is, what is this going to do for us?
Well, I think that in many ways, I mean, COVID was one of the most challenging times for many of us. And it was new for many of us, right? I mean, there's always silver linings. And one of the biggest silver linings from the pandemic is that we got to see a different way of working and a different way of living. And as a result, it has opened up the airways, because it's almost like all the divisions between countries are gone. And because we can digitally do pretty much everything we need to, and now countries are becoming more high speed, which is allowing more people to get there and to work from there, it is changed everything. And so I do think it's a huge benefit, not only for people, individuals who want to do this kind of thing, but also for companies who now it's almost like their world is opened up to so much talent, and it has downsides too, right? Because the overwhelm of information and available people becomes challenging. But, I see it as a very positive thing. And it is enabling more people to travel who may not have thought about it before.
Well, I can tell you, we meet people coming through here all the time. I'm on a site, and it's basically for people who sold their house and or all their belongings like you have done, and they've downsized and decided to discover the world. It's like, the world was always there. Hello.
Yeah. But again,
But we didn't have that perspective. And so now it's very exciting to see people of so many backgrounds and pedigrees and cultural orientations, and everybody absolutely pile on to this. And we get lots of them who come to San Miguel, and I just love it. I just love it. It gives me a real kick to see this happening. And also, I think that in my world, I was kind of living in a bit of a privileged society, because I am a product. My husband is a product of the colonial age. My mother-in-law was the first. She was second generation, because she was not a digital nomad, but she was born in Ireland because her dad was military, and she lived all over the world. So my daughter is like fourth generation of travelers.
Yeah.
And so this is becoming, I think, more, there's a rising awareness about that, about how is history penetrating the next generation and the next generation.
Yeah. And, when I look at the first time I traveled was when I was 15 years old, and I was in a concert band, and we performed in 5 countries in Europe. Now, who has the opportunity at that
Right.
age to do that
Right.
on their
Right.
own. I wasn't with my
Yes.
parents. And
Yeah.
so, and there was no cell phones or anything at that time.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
had this, and because my grandparents on both sides of my family are directly European, they're not
Yes.
American.
Yeah.
We've
They're
always had that influence of
of the immigrant.
countries, yeah, of
Yeah.
immigrants, and there was always an interest to learn more about where they came from and what
Yeah.
culture like. I mean, even I only knew my grandmother on my mother's side for 5 years, and then she passed when I was young. But I went to the town she grew up in Slovakia because I just was so curious, and I've heard so much
Yes.
about her
Yeah.
and whatever I remembered,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm passionate about, is learning, different cultures and how
Right.
people live.
You and I were both very fortunate. I had that installed in me in a different way in Scotland, but my dad had been an immigrant to the US. And so I always grew up with this, America is a great place to live, sort of subconsciously at the back of my mind. And we were fortunate. Not everyone has that message or that installation in the desktop of their minds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's why we have so many diverse experiences, especially in the US nowadays.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to the subject of, I asked you the other day if you'd ever heard of a cultural mentor.
And I hadn't heard the term.
But you know what it is. It's pretty, you get what it is. Yes. It's like a cultural, not a coach, but it's like a guide. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I would say my cultural mentors are probably the friends and colleagues I have who live in the countries I want to go live, visit, live. So I got my mentorship from other people, from them, as well as from, I'm not big on researching a ton. I will when I get there, because then I have more context. So that was the first time I've heard of that term.
Yes, I think that's probably for more like settled nomads, but I think it's something that I would love digital nomads to take on board also, is to find yourself a cultural mentor even before you go. And it can be anybody. My current cultural mentor, I have many here now, but the one that lives right next door is my Mexican neighbor. And sometimes we go over there and say, what does this mean? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
Because there's so much in the intercultural field that is very subconscious. And until you sit there and tease it out, it is just baffling.
Yes.
So tell me about the amount of energy it takes to learn, to process, and to manage a new destination. And tell me about that. How long does it take for you to feel like you've found your feet in a place? And I know it's different for every place, but just approximately.
Yeah, I will say it's been a journey. It has not been that's probably one of the most high stressors in this kind of a lifestyle, because you're still in the last place you are. You're exploring where to go next. There's lots of options. I mean, the thing that I'm blessed to have is oftentimes my work will dictate where I'm going next, but sometimes it's not. And when it isn't, it challenges you to, one, be more decisive, to stay grounded, and also to stay focused, right? Because your energy can get dispersed, especially when you're closing, as soon as I know I'm leaving somewhere in a few weeks, I can start to feel, I've got to, think about this and think about that. And then you're not as present in the current location as most people are that aren't doing this kind of travel. And I will say that it's a different experience now than it was when I started, and even since a year ago. I have just grown in many ways and have strengthen my own intuition and increase my own trust, to get support from all different areas to help me kind of choose and look and see who's there and making connections that I would normally make. So that's probably the largest stressor, aside from making sure I have high speed internet and it's reliable.
And it doesn't drop.
Exactly.
Or
That's
sign up to
the only
Starlink for no reason.
Yeah.
So what do you think the difference is between being a tourist and a traveler?
Oh, I think it's a big difference. So for example, I have been to Italy many times. Most of my family's in Sicily still, and so I get back there, but I've been to many areas of Italy and I feel comfortable there. And I chose 2 years ago to live in Florence. And part of that too was because of, the brand I developed around Renaissance leadership. I wanted to immerse myself in the Renaissance. There was a very strong intention of why I was there. And when I went, it's so fascinating because I've been to Florence several times. And that makes a difference, right? Because when you're back, you just feel like, oh, I'm here. I'm not a tourist anywhere. I didn't need to see all the touristy things.
Yeah.
And even if I hadn't yet, like even as I'm in San Miguel, right? It's like I got to see several things that you guys showed me around. That was so beautiful. And I made sure there was time when I arrived that I didn't have a lot of work. Like there was time I knew I needed to work. But it's a different mindset because you're looking for different things. Like I'm looking for memberships to yoga studios or Pilates, I'm looking to see where shopping is because I'm not going out to eat so much. And it's just, it's different. But what's really funny, I think, about it is depending on the location, if I say, oh, I'm going to live in Italy, it's inevitable. Everyone I know who's not a nomad will say, how's your trip going? And I would say, well, it's actually not a trip. I'm living and working here. And after a while, I just chuckle because it's like, it's a tourist would say trip. And that's the biggest difference.
So this is basically your answer to how do you stay in one place and how does it contribute to a deeper cultural, let's say, immersion? Because
that's a great question.
You are becoming much more immersed in a culture and much more at the affect of that culture when you are doing routine day-to-day experiences that to other people are novel. And of course, our minds have a love-hate affair with novelty. We love the novelty when we arrive in a new place. I love to go to new places. But then after a while, it takes so much it takes so much mental and physical energy to process new places all the time.
I definitely experienced that. And that's why I would consider myself now more as a slowmad, where I'm going to places for, 6 to 8 weeks, to 12 weeks to more.
Definitely.
In one place, because there's a physical part of this in our own nervous system, right? Where as soon as I know I'm landing somewhere, my nervous system can completely go,
stable.
Okay, oh, good.
Yes.
Whereas years ago let's compare this to my first time in Costa Rica. This is kind of funny, is talk about a lesson in letting go. I literally got to a point in Costa Rica when I didn't know where I was going to stay the next night. I mean, there are plenty of options. It wasn't like on the street, but I just kept practicing trusting in the moment.
Yeah.
And I remember chuckling because I'd go up to the front desk to I was staying at a long-term hotel thing. And I'd say, can I stay another night? It was like, she would just start laughing.
Dave, you were literally living in the present. You were living day by day, right?
In the present. But it was an incredible gift to let go and trust that all
Yeah.
is well. Like, it's okay. I don't have to know.
Yes.
And now I'm at the point where it's almost the opposite. Like, I do want to stay somewhere for a whole month. And I know, regardless of how it goes, I'll
Right.
figure out and if it doesn't work out, you
Yeah.
go somewhere else. Everything's figure outable.
Yes. I've been saying that for a long time. So I have another question that you and I haven't talked about yet. And I can sort of guess the answers, but I'm sure our listeners who are, if they're thinking about moving, picking up, it's scary. And there are consequences, right? So, how do you maintain a positive mindset? This is crucial while you're traveling. You've got to keep that positive mindset. Do you have some spiritual, mental, physical, or emotional practices that you like to use on the road?
I do, for sure. A couple of them are, so I meditate. I don't meditate like consistently every day, but it is important that I do a short, even grounding meditation because, there were times when I was on the road where I was not grounded and I was either maybe at a conference that was so active, you're around all these people, all this energy is impacting my own and I'm not even recognizing it. So grounding is really important to me. I do bring like crystals and on the road with me, just little ones, sometimes different crystals can help ground. I also, I have many mentors that I work with, whether it's a speaker coach, a spiritual mentor. I have many that I, hire and work with that are hugely important to keep me in that place of positivity and help me get answers when I'm struggling. And in those situations, I do draw on that support as well. And for example, last year, I was going through a lot of change and a lot of letting go of things. And as a result of some exercises one of my mentors gave me, I came up with a one-sheeter of what are my promises for which would be this coming year. And then I created a fun like watercolor mural of the promises and I put them in a laminated folder and I literally read them every day. This coming year. And
that's what it takes.
It made a huge difference because it keeps me on track. And I'm part of, again, other mastermind groups and support where I'm weekly in calls. So that's huge for me because, having my business for being a solopreneur for 25 years, you have to create connection in other ways.
Yes, you do. You do. And do you find that that helps you balance the geographical distance that gets created when you move and the jostling that happens to our souls every time? I think there's a bit of soul jostling that goes on every time we go to a new place because it's taking the body and the mind so much mental space and activity to find our center and get regrounded again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, just like entrepreneurship, it's not for everybody. And, the reason this isn't a forever lifestyle for me. I mean, I'm slowing down and I will ultimately, I've always known I would live in a few places each year just because whether it's the same few places per year.
Yeah.
But I also have the kind of personality that I thrive on change. I like change. I look for change. So not everyone's like that. And those who are not, it's not their thing. So
it motivates us. It pulls us forward. It captivates us. It creates interest and energy in the brain pathways, I think.
Yeah. And so
that's a lot.
What might stress many people when they hear about what it's like doesn't really stress me. It's like, oh, this is how it is. Like, it's just like, you're delayed on a plane. How do you handle that? There's all this tiny compared to many things that can happen on the road. So,
Excellent. And so finally, just as we wrap this up shortly, do you have some wisdom that we can leave our listeners with today about integrating your work obligations and your travel possibilities or vision so that it helps them sew together their travel business lifestyle?
It's interesting because in a way, I've always worked remotely since I started my business 25 years ago. So to me, it's my business has not slowed down. There may be in the beginning, when I was in Costa Rica, I gave myself a few months to make sure I didn't have a rough schedule, a very busy schedule. That's really important, is to balance knowing when you're super busy. I mean, I do 6 to 8 month leadership programs with clients, that not all the time and not with a million clients, but with a few. And I know that I already know my dates and my schedules, and ensuring that everything's set for those and where I'm going to be is going to be reliable. So that's additional work that I just make sure I am aware of, and I do, so that there's no concern on any one side of that. And so a lot of it is anticipating what's coming up. I mean, did I expect to write a book while I was doing this? No. I mean, the book came through me.
Yes.
And again, when I wrote my book, it just worked out. It was like one of those, again, things just fell into place. And I was able to have dedicated time to write my book, and I'm going to write another one next year. So it's just you figure it out. Just like if I were staying in one place, it's just that there's that added,
details.
And hopefully, and hopefully the best parts are when you're not in the middle of travel and in the middle of, a big work thing. And I try and schedule that out so that I know now what's important to me when I have dedicated work that I have to complete.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom. And do you have any final words for our listeners if they're thinking about launching, or if they're experiencing some rumble on the road, as we all do at times because stuff happens? Do you have any words of wisdom in closing?
Sure. Know what your risk level is. And set yourself up to have that in place, because you don't need to, if you're exploring this journey, there's no need to put added pressure on. So, for example, I became home free. Other people keep a home, so they know they've got something. Know what's important to you, know your values, and stick with those and honor those while you're on the journey. And you can take one small step at a time. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a big thing.
Exactly. Well, these are great things to think about. Know your risk level, write your promises. And I think also in everything that I've heard, I think a common theme would be that it's know yourself.
Yeah.
And honor yourself. So I am so grateful for this conversation. And I'm so grateful that you're here in San Miguel. And we're going to have some fun over Christmas. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jean Marie.
You're very welcome.
And we will put all of your details and your links, etc., inside the show notes. So, dear listener, please listen, share, review, please. We love reviews, or comment about the podcast. And if you have any questions for Jean Marie, they're going to be on the show notes, and we'll be happy to connect you. Bye-bye.